Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Bill Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. I am officially back and back loaded with a lot of content ready for you guys this week. And yes, we will have our show Basketball Conversations back on Friday at a normal time, 9 p.m. Central Time. We'll have a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in the world of basketball. We're nearing the home stretch of the playoffs, so you're going to get a lot of my analysis, opinions, and things that I've been seeing throughout this week in the NBA. So stay tuned for that, though, guys. So we are back with Morning Historical Perspective. So for those of the new people that are coming in, okay, this is basically my morning type of episodes where I basically reflect on great players, games, greatest moments, historical achievements, anything you want me to talk about. So if you got any requests that you want me to do, just hit the comment section and I'll make sure to get you your video done ASAP Rocky. So to start out this week, though, guys, we're gonna discuss about the one of the greatest defensive plays you'll ever see in the play in the history of the playoffs, and that is the steal in the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals, game number 5. So before we get to that specific play, we're gonna discuss about the background between the two teams, between the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics. Okay, by this time, during the mid 80s, both the Lakers and the Celtics were pretty much the kings of the NBA at that period of time. Okay. And the Boston Celtics, fresh off of their historical 85-86 season, won the NBA title. They won the 84 championship and won the title in 86. So they won 2 out of the last 3 NBA championships, and also including 1981 as well. So take that, they've won 3 NBA championships in the 80s. Okay. But basically heading into that 86-87 season, it was pretty much expected that the Celtics were going to continue the same winning ways as they were before. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out the way they hoped for. Even though they still were the best team in the Eastern Conference that year, their road back to the NBA Finals was very, very difficult. Now, to reflect back on the 86 draft, okay, with their top pick, they picked Len Bias, okay? This was a young player from Maryland that was expected to be the next player coming in to be the next face of the Celtics as Bird, McHale, and Parrish were entering their twilight years, okay? Unfortunately, he died of the overdose. Now, if you want to see the historical perspective on both Len Bias and Reggie Lewis, it's all in the archives there. You can go check it out for yourselves. But that year, the Boston Celtics were pretty much a team that still remained a elite team, but unfortunately, you know things changed. Okay, the Celtics endured many key injuries. Guys like Bill Walton, Ken McHale, Robert Parrish, they missed a lot of time due to injuries. Okay, and that year too as well. Remember, back in '86, Bert also injured his back shoveling gravel in his mother's driveway. So this was the beginning of the Bird injury years when he was basically playing injured with a very bad back. All right, and despite the fact that they were still dominant on their home floor, going 39-2 in the Boston Garden, the Celtics had a terrible road record. They only finished with 20 wins and 21 losses. All right, and so during that year, the Celtics were basically playing subpar 500 ball on the road while still defending their home court. The one team that was making moves in the Eastern Conference were the Detroit Pistons. All right, and you got to go all the way back to 1981 when they basically drafted Isiah Thomas. All right, the great point guard from Indiana University. Then the key moves coming in. They brought in uh, Bill Laimbeer back in 1982. They basically traded for Bill Laimbeer, and then the next year they brought in Rick Mahorn from the Bullets. All right, so you already had 2 physically imposing players on your front line, but the bigger moves came in during their offseason in '86 when they basically traded Kelly Tripucka the uh, to the Jazz for high scoring Adrian Dantley. Then in the draft, they also drafted John Sally and Dennis Rodman in the first and second rounds. Those draft picks and the acquisition of Adrian Dantley helped the Pistons become the new blood in the Eastern Conference. This was a team right now at that particular point that was ready. ready and primed to make a move to the top of the Eastern Conference standings. All right. That year, they Pistons finished with 52 regular season victories. The Celtics finished with 59. And heading into that conference final between the two teams in '87, the Celtics already just went through a tough 7-game series against the Milwaukee Bucks, and now they had to go up against the bad boy Detroit Pistons that were posed and ready to basically dethrone the Celtics. And after splitting the first 2 games, which also includes Bird and Laimbeer in their fighting duel in Game 3, the series was tied up in 2 games apiece. This was the biggest game of the entire series, as you guys already know. This was pretty much a back and forth affair between these two outstanding teams, which also featured Robert Parrish taking his liberties to get after Bill Laimbeer for what he did to Bird back in Detroit. So we're gonna fast forward to basically to the final 27 seconds. Okay, the final 27 seconds. All right, what happened? The Pistons had the ball. Isiah Thomas was isolated off of the top of the left elbow and hit a very difficult shot over Sam over what's the name? Sam Seaston. Yeah, Sam Seaston. Right. So heading into the final 17 seconds, the Celtics were ready to run a flare play for Larry Bird to be isolated at the top of the left side of the court to go 1-on-1. And that time, the Pistons knew what they were going to run and basically assigned Rick Mahorn to defend against Larry Bird. Bird drove baseline and basically was trying to draw a foul, or even better yet, score a bucket. The Pistons read the play all the way, blocked the shot, and they blocked it out of bounds. Unfortunately, Jerry Seasting touched the ball last, and the referees ruled it Detroit's basketball. All right. Detroit had the ball with basically with 7 seconds to go in the game, right? Actually, with 5 seconds. And all the Pistons had to do was inbound the ball, protect the basketball, and the game was theirs, right? Unfortunately, what happened is that the Pistons had a timeout remaining, and Chuck Daly was trying to signal for a timeout, but the players were so busy celebrating that great defensive stand that they forgot that they still had a timeout remaining to keep the possession and possibly advance the ball to their end, basically to the Celtics end, so that way they can prepare for a play and just try to seal the game with some free throws. Lo behold, Isiah Thomas quickly ran to the same spot, all right, to inbound the ball. Instead of inbounding the ball to the other side of the court, he decided to inbound the ball to Bill Laimbeer behind his own basket. Bird quickly knew where the ball was going to, and through his great vision, he basically tracked the ball and stole the inbound pass. All right, he stole the inbound pass. Dennis Johnson was standing at the top of the key for the 3-point line and immediately cut to the basket. Bird saw Dennis Johnson coming through, passed him the ball, and basically dished him off for the game-winning layup with 1 second remaining. All right, and this one was a very, very devastating loss for the Detroit Pistons. Okay, had the Pistons decided to change course and decided to pass the ball to the Celtics end, okay, that means they would have at least killed 5 seconds remaining on the clock, and they would have taken a 3-2 lead heading back to the Pontiac Silverdome. But instead, the Pistons were not smart. They did not make the right play and made a terrible mistake and basically passed the ball to their own basket. So pretty much, there were a lot of things that you could blame it on to. But give credit where credit's due to Bird and his greatness. Bird was always a guy that always played chess with his opponents. And when he saw where the pass was going to do, in a quick flash, he made the play and made the game-winning assist to basically save the Celtics season. All right. Instead of being down 3-2 in Detroit, they went up 3-2. That's a big difference. If the Celtics lost the game, they go back to the Pontiac Silverdome down 3-2, and most likely their season would have been over. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be the case. Even though the Pistons stood ground in their home court to force a Game 7, their best chance to win the series was back in Game 5. Now, remember, Game 7 was pretty much a back and forth affair. Now, if Adrian Dantley didn't collide heads with his own teammate Vinny Johnson and was forced to come out of the ball game on a stretcher, there's a good chance that the Celtics may have had a chance to beat them in Game 7 and advance to the NBA Finals. We never know. But the Celtics were able to ride their horses to the finish line, and somehow, some way, they limped their way to the NBA Finals, where they had to end up against the freshly, rested and healthy Showtime Lakers. And even though the Celtics did everything they could to try to force it, to try to make this series competitive, I think there were a lot of people, even across America, that knew that the Lakers were just a vastly superior team than the Celtics were in '87. Because considering the fact you had no Bill Walton, you had Bill Rick. I'm sorry, Kevin McHale was pretty much playing on a broken bone in his foot. Okay, Danny Ainge was playing on a bad ankle. Dennis Johnson was basically spent because he was basically an older person at that time. Bird back injuries were coming into effect in '87. Okay, and they pretty much had no bench. And Casey Jones had to ride his starters throughout the entire season. And it pretty much showed in the '87 series where the Lakers pretty much ran ragged through the Celtics. And pretty much it ended in 6. And that was pretty much the end of that particular era in Boston. They never returned back to the NBA Finals. By the next year, the Pistons learned their lesson from '87. They came back, won Game 5 in the Boston Garden, and then came back, won the series in 6, and became the new king of the Eastern Conference. And ultimately, despite the loss against the Lakers in the '88 Finals, they came back, won back-to-back titles in '89 and '90, and along the way started another rivalry against Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and the Chicago Bulls. So all this stuff kind of reflects back onto the great play. Like I said, if the Celtics would have won on to lose that game, that's a 3-2 deficit. And playing in that noisy arena in the Pontiac Silverdome at that time, you're asking the Celtics to go in hostile territory and win a game in their house. I don't think that would have been likely. And so that play had an enormous weight on it. All right. Not only that it saved their season, but it basically kept them surviving for another day, obviously. But also, a lot of good came out of that series, though, too. Not just because how great the game was and how, that fantastic series was, but it really showed the evolution of the Detroit Pistons. Not only did they learn their lesson from '87, but they got better in '88. And if it wasn't for that bogus call on Bill Laimbeer against Kareem in Game 6, who you never know, they could have been the first team to three-peat it. You never know. And then they basically came back in '88, even though they traded away Adrian Dantley, which was not a smart move, even though they still got Mark Aguirre and still won their championship. Adrian Dantley got robbed of that championship because he was the guy that helped put the Pistons over the hump. It was not Isiah. It was not Laimbeer. It was not Dumars. Okay, it was the draft picks of John Sally and Dennis Rodman and the acquisition of Adrian Dantley that got the Pistons over the hump. You cannot dispute that whatsoever. But at the end of the day, this great play will go down in lore as one of the all-time greatest plays in NBA history, and certainly one of the great moments of Larry Bird's career, as pretty much his career was entering into its twilight years, as the back injuries, and all those long playoff wars basically wore down on the Celtics. But without a doubt, this is without a doubt kindled memories of John Havlicek's steal back in 1964 against the Philadelphia 76ers. So it was a great play, one of the great moments in NBA history, but also the game's also on YouTube as well, so you can easily go ahead and check out the game yourselves there too as well. And certainly the '80s were still one of the great eras of NBA basketball, and you're going to be in for a treat if you watch any great playoff game during the '80s. They were wars back then, legit wars. And anytime the Pistons and the Celtics met each other in the mid '80s, you trust me, they were battles, they were wars that went on for years, and still some of the same old feelings still hold on to this day, particularly from Isiah and Bird, and also from Bird and Laimbeer. Those two do not like each other to this very, very day. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just goes to show you that sometimes, even as time goes on, those old same wounds, they just never go away. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section.